people have been asking me, when's the next podcast episode? When are you going to do another one? I mean, the last one we did was all the way back in July, or some people say July, and that was with John Elmore, George Washington, legend, went on to play at Marshall, did wonders down there. We had him right before the basketball tournament in Charleston, and then since then, football season happened, and I kind of went on a little bit of a hiatus. But
Mm-hmm.
with this podcast moving forward, hopefully we can start cranking out some more leading into the start of the basketball season starting November 4th with games starting on December 6th. And what
Mm-hmm.
what better way to get back into the flow of things than talking with a former girls basketball standout both at Charleston Catholic and the University of Charleston herself. Now is the winningest all-time women's basketball coach at Stetson University. Let's just welcome her in. I mean, there's nothing else more to say. Let's just get right into it. Coach Lynn Bria. Coach, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Taylor, and thank you for having me. But I don't know if I can follow John Elmore. That's all I'm gonna tell you. That guy, I tell you what, he can still play. Is he not phenomenal?
Oh, he's
Watching him on that
unbelievable.
league. I know his dad really well. I've known John forever, but his dad is just his dad was a great player as well. We grew up in South Charleston, so and knowing your dad very well also. So it was so good to run into your dad, and your dad he got some buckets too. Now he was a player. He was really good. So I was it was so good to see you all at the Legends Banquet that Tex does. He did a phenomenal job with that. So, and I appreciate you having me. This is just an honor for me. I love the people at the 304. I don't make any bones about it. That's my home state. And I always tell people we got that one area code. So if you're from the 304, you're family. So that's just the way, that's how I see it. So I just appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk with you.
Well, you turn the mountains into palm trees, so you got the
They're
better end
right
of the
behind me
stick.
too. That's
Exactly.
right. I got to kind of rub that in every once in a while. I get to do that. We should have done this in December. Then I really could have been rubbing it in, because it'd be snowing there. And then I could, go, hey, look at this.
Well,
So
I'll say this though, on my way to work, I wish I was in Florida because the fog was just super dense, and I was just like, I can't
yeah,
even see. But now I'm just like,
yeah.
Coach Bria definitely has the advantage in the weather right now.
We do.
But
We got the beach and the beach and the beach. It's not a bad life.
oh,
Not
absolutely
bad at
not.
all. But we do not have the people from the great state of West by God. The people up there are still the best ever.
Okay, so let's start there because that's really interesting that you bring that up. Being down in Florida for as
Hmm.
long as you have at Stetson, how
Yeah,
often do you look back on your time at West Virginia and you just say, "Man, those are some great times"?
yeah. All the time. I mean, everything I do is from growing up there. I mean, I had great coaches there when I played starting in junior high school. I mean, I just had really really good coaches. I grew up in a little town called Smithers. I mean, I tell people all the time, the only person who heard of Smithers, West Virginia, is Bob Huggins. When I first met Huggy Bear, he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Smithers." He went, "Smithers?" Mm-hmm. He said, "I know." He even knew people. I said, "You're the only person that's ever known where that is." But it's a little town in Fayette County. And then when I was 10, we moved to South Charleston and had an amazing experience there as far as athletically. It was good for me. Sports were just a lot better, a lot more opportunities. So just had really, really good coaching in junior high school. I played tennis and basketball. My dad always told me I was a much better tennis player than basketball player, and I could have maybe made a little money, but I just love basketball. I love the team camaraderie of basketball, whereas tennis is a little more of an individual sport. So, and then when I went to Charleston Catholic, I played for Frank Scagnelli, who was great, and Rocky Calabrese, just really, really good for me. And I had really good coaching there, great assistants there at Charleston Catholic as well. And then I went to University of Charleston and played for Bud Francis, he won the conference 10 of his 11 years. So, I learned a lot. I started my coaching career at Marshall, worked under Judy Southard, and really Judy just showed me a lot and got me started in coaching, and I'm just forever grateful to her. So if it wasn't for her and people like Greg White really helped me get my foot in the door. Because if I wasn't, you just need somebody, when you're a young coach and you want to get in, you want to break into college coaching, it's really hard. It's just, one of the hardest part is to get your foot in the door. So you have to have somebody that's going to take a chance on you because nobody knows you. And Greg made a phone call to Judy for me, and that's how I got my foot in the door at Marshall. And that's kind of how it started. Then once you do that, you just got to do a good job where you are. So if you're good where you are, and you do your job diligently, then it tends to take care of itself. You don't have to chase the next job; they'll come find you, and that's how it's always worked out for me.
Having that motivation from what you learned growing up to where you are now, do you kind of rub that off of what you learned at an early age down to your younger assistant coaches or even your GAs as well to try and
Mhm.
continue to push them in the right direction, similar to what Coach White did for you at an early age?
Oh yeah, yeah. You have to pass it on. I mean, I think I've been doing this now, I don't know, 28 years. I mean, it's I think I have assistants that played for me, and I think that's a real compliment when you have people on your staff that not only played for you, but they want to come back and coach with you. Um, but I think, that's one of my main jobs is to pass it on. And people gave me opportunities, they showed me. And I think we all have our different personalities that we put on the game. I don't think I can't be Judy Southard, I can't be Greg White, I can't be the legendary Pat Summitt. You try to borrow and steal from them, but you have to be who you are and put your own stamp on it and kind of run your race. And but I think, in passing that on, and I really think a lot too. I mean, I sit there and go, I can't believe how many great coaches have come out of the state of West Virginia. If you think about this, I mean, it's unbelievable. And, I didn't know. I was watching a documentary on Lou Holtz, and I didn't know he was from West Virginia. I had no idea about that. So I thought that's another one, from Nick Saban to Lou Holtz. And, so there's a lot of great coaches, and I think there's just a lot of learning. But I've even gone back, and I've never stopped learning. That's the thing about me, Taylor. I think, I don't know it all, and I've never felt like I know it all. I've always stayed hungry. I've always wanted to get better. You're always looking for an edge in this business. If you don't, um, then you're not going to make it. And I think part of my longevity is I've stayed hungry, and I've just tried to better myself, even if it's just a little bit. I think the harder, it's kind of like when you first start playing basketball, it's easy. You see those kids when they're real young, elementary, middle school, and they improve, and you see a big, big gap improvement. And then you get to high school, you see a big gap, and even college, but it's not as big as those gaps. I think as you get higher in the ranks, you're looking for small improvements because you're getting to the where you're almost tapped, not tapped out, but you're getting up to your potential, and that's kind of you're using your talents, and but you're constantly looking for that edge. So I just, I go back, I've gone back. It's how I became close with Hugs, is I go back and watch him practice. I get talk to Greg White a lot still. I go back and watch people practice, and I think it's really you just keep learning. You have to keep learning in whatever business you're in. You have to keep learning and growing. And none of us really have it. The only thing a person said anything new about this game was Dr. James Naismith. The rest of us, we just steal and borrow. But I think you constantly have to evolve yourself and find an edge. And I think in the years I've done that. But I constantly like to I love it when my assistants, when they go get jobs. I've had some assistants now that go get head jobs, and they use what I've taught them. And I think that's the greatest compliment to me, is when I have, players and assistant coaches that, they feel like that I've helped them in some way with kind of their legacy and what they're going to do and how they're going to run their programs.
Along those lines of being able to see your players succeed on the bigger and better things, I would assume your evolution of coaching has definitely changed and taken on different forms to adapt to different circumstances as well. How has the evolution of your coaching philosophy really changed over your
Mhm.
whole coaching career?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think, you know, I think if you don't, well, one, I think as coaches, you should just want to get better. But like, I mean, I can't coach players now like I was coached. And if you do not evolve, and players are different in regards to, I think, how you approach them. You cannot I was always told, you do this, do this, do that, and you just did it. You didn't ask why, you didn't get a full blown explanation. You didn't, But now I think players now want to know why, and they want to know why we should be doing that, and they need to understand more of the deeper meaning to it. And I think when they do, they play better, they practice better. So, um, I think the coaches that haven't evolved, they're not coaching anymore. You cannot coach the same old way. So I think it's evolved because it's had to, because of, this portal's been a big deal. I mean, you've got kids just up and leaving. I mean, you got over 1,300 players in the portal, and um, I don't ever want a kid to leave. I don't. You try to keep them, do all you can. We try to, your recruiting has to be, I think, much more diligent. You have to know their families. That's why we get on kids. We try to get on them very early and know their families, and check out their upbringing. And but I do think players, these student athletes today, they are the same as when I played. Their needs are the same. Your approach just has to be different. I don't think they have a problem working hard and understanding. You don't have you can be demanding, that they'll respond to that. You just have to, your approach just has to be a little different. So I think, now I ask more questions. Before they coached me, they gave commands and I did it. Now it's, you ask more questions. How can we do this better? How do you think we practice today? And I think once they give you that feedback, if they're not happy with it, then you get a much better response the next day, to where now that practice is really good. So you have to get them to buy in, and they have to feel like that, they have a big part in it.
You mentioned it already, so I want to take it from this angle. I was going to get to it down the line, but you brought it up. What are your thoughts on the transfer portal in regards to women's basketball? We've seen the ramifications on the men's side, but I don't think it's talked about enough what's going on the women's basketball side. How has the transfer portal really affected you all at Stetson?
Yeah, I think the transfer portal is really good for a small percentage of student athletes. I think for a small percentage, I think it's really good. I think there's way too many players in it. And I think it's happening too much. I think my biggest concern is that, what are we teaching our young people? They don't like something. They don't like where the coach plays them. They don't like, whatever, and the tampering that's going on within programs, um, from one 4-year school to another 4-year school, through either the high school coach or AU coach, I think is really lacks integrity. So I think overall, I don't think it's a positive thing, but I do think for a percentage of players, a small percentage, it is a good thing. It is needed, so I just think it's being overused and it's being abused. And I think anytime you have those two words with anything, it's not a good thing. So my biggest concern though is what are we teaching our young people in regards to commitment when things get hard, when things get tough? I mean, do they get to quit their marriage? Do they get to quit, on their children? Do they disown, do they divorce their kids? Because it gets tough, because you have to work it out, because you have to have a conversation, I mean, that these kids can get in that portal and never have a conversation with the head coach. I mean, the head coach can get it through an email, and that is really sad to me, that we allow something like that to happen. And we're the adults, we're the people that, well, I don't know who's making these rules. I don't know that I voted for this, but I'm not going to totally blame the NCAA. I'm not really blaming anybody, except, I think we all just need to step back and go, is this really working? And is this the best thing for our young people? Because I don't believe it is. I haven't seen that. I think it's just being abused.
What you just said, is that also similar to what you've heard amongst other chair people within the Division 1 women's basketball rules committee? Because you do serve as a chair on that committee. Is
Mhm.
that synopsis or that analysis that you just said? Is that what you're also hearing amongst other chairmen?
Well, I think, well, I just got off the chair. I'm not the chair anymore. I just finished in August, but yes, I have been on there for 4 years, and I was the chair for 2. So you're right about that. But, you know, again, I just got off of that in August. But I think, when you talk to other coaches or people, I think it just, um, I I would say the feeling's the same, with other coaches. I think, so many kids got to the point where they were filing for waivers and they were wanting this and wanting, and part of me is I look at the NCAA and go, man, they were just inundated with paperwork because there were so many players filing for a waiver. And finally they just said, hey, you know what? One-time transfer, you can transfer. And I kind of in some ways I get why the NCAA went, okay, have at it, get in the transfer portal, but you got a lot of players making a knee-jerk reaction, and hate it at their next school because they think the grass is always greener. There's problems at that school too. They don't think there is, but there's problems there too. Um, and then you have also players that are stuck in that portal. They're not getting anything. They're not getting a place to go. So I think it's really it's a lot to lose for a player by getting into that portal if it's not right. Really is. But yes, I do think it's across the board, in regard to coaches that this is a problem. But I don't think it's going away. I think it's where we are. When you ask me the question about evolving your coaching, I used to be, like I don't want, I want a kid for 4 year. I love 4 year kids. I want four, but now I just kind of, you have to kind of just go with it. You have to go, okay. I had an administrator tell me who was actually on that rules committee, who was phenomenal. She's an outstanding administrator. And she looked at me and she said, Lynn, I'm just going to tell you, look at your team right now. And that's your team, but that is not your team for next year. And, I'm just, you know, I really love the relationships with the kids. I think, I love the people I coach. They're outstanding young women, and I enjoy them being here and getting to know them and their families. And I hate it that we have this kind of revolving door with all these programs. Not, we haven't had it bad here, but we've had some of it just like everybody else, and it's hard. You don't want kids to go. Now I do think too, like we had a couple kids. We had a kid graduate last year, and she was here. She graduated, got her degree, and basically, she just wanted something different for 1 year. I think that's okay. I think once you serve you've played there, whether you're a junior college, she was a junior college player. She was here for 3 years, got her degree, or your 4 years, you get your degree. If you want to take that last year and go somewhere else and play just to experience something different, I don't see anything wrong with that. You've completed that. You've done that. So, and I do think there are exceptions. There are kids, like I said, that need the portal. They need to get back home, but because of health reasons or mental health reasons. I'm not saying, I think that's okay too, but I don't think it's the percentage that we have in there now.
Everything you said resonates with what I believe as well, because one thing that I think is going to really hurt long term is the relationships between the coaches and the players. And what you just said, and hearing what you said as well,
Hmm.
the relationship side means a lot more than some other things. I mean, it may not be more
Hmm.
important than X's and O's, but the
Right.
relationship side is a very big piece of to who you are as a coach. So my question to
Right.
you is, as a coach, do you have to focus more on the relationship side of things, or do you have to focus more on the X's and O's in this new lifestyle of collegiate athletics with this transfer portal and with NIL?
Yeah, I think the first thing you have to do is lock in on your recruitment in regards to your evaluation. I think that's the key to, for us. I think we've had a lot of success because we know how to evaluate and we know what fits us. There are a lot of coaches who just offer every player. We do not do that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but we don't do that. I have 12 on my roster right now. Many coaches carry 15. If I just went around offering kids left and right, I'd probably have 15 or more, but we don't. So I think you have to start there. And then I think you have to get to it. And I think there's another side to this, Taylor, that I didn't mention. So many of these kids too, they're shopped to go to the highest level. And I don't think there's anything wrong with going to the highest level. If they want to go to a big SEC school or a big ACC school, I think that there's nothing wrong with that. However, when they get there, they don't understand that you're just sitting there. So you're doing all the conditioning, you're lifting weights, you're getting up early in the morning, and you're not playing. And I think the reality of it is they don't understand the reality of, I could go to a mid-major and I could be the star of the show and play all the time. And, I just think they don't think about things of that nature. And I think it's always about going to the highest. And I think that's a shame. And that's another reason why we have so many kids in there, because they're not being directed. If I had to open up a business, if I didn't coach, I would probably go into some type of advisement on, like, what are you, mom, dad, why are you pushing your daughter to go? Is that really the best thing for her? And is she going to play there?
Mhm.
So they don't think about the playing time, and every kid wants to play now. So I think you have to really look at your evaluation, and you have to really look at the fit, as far as that. And I think it really begins there, as far as navigating through the portal. And we've used the portal as well. We've signed players, we have transfers on our team, and that have really helped us. But the reality is, Stetson, for me, I do like, we can't have a whole team of transfers. That just does not fit who we are.
Mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm right there with you with that.
Mhm.
Another thing that you mentioned that I've really started to discuss more so now more than ever, and that's the mental health side of things with these student
Mhm.
athletes. And I give a lot of credit to WVSSAC here in West Virginia, but also there are some other programs within the NCAA that have helped students in regards to that. And you're starting to see a lot more of that at the collegiate level, just because there's a lot more asked of them compared to a high school athlete. But it happens in general, is what I'm trying to
Mhm.
say. How much of a focus do you take out during maybe day-to-day activities or a weekly basis to try and um, understand what each of your student athletes are going through from the mental health side of things?
Yeah, well, I think, back to your last question, this when you asked if it was more basketball or relationship, it's relationship. I think they have to fit the basketball court, and I'm gonna get to the answer as far as mental health to this question. Is they have to fit who we are on the court, but the reality is, it is about the relationships, and I think that's where this mental health thing comes in as well. Because I do think this is a big deal. I think these kids have so much coming out. When I played, you read stuff in the paper the next day. Now it's basically instantaneous. So when something happens, it's instantaneous. You know, if you know, if you were out at a party the night before, people talked about it, but it wasn't really pumped out in the paper unless somebody got arrested. So now it's recorded and put it on social media. I just think they have so much more coming at them, and they have so much more, um, really, they have to be, so much more negativity, so much more pressure,
Mhm.
in regards to, am I good enough? And I think that's really hard for not just for, I think it would be hard for anyone, so, and their social media, it is important. The NIL is important. Everybody's got, it's all the comparison trap, and I always tell them, that, comparison steals your joy, so, um, but we do address that. We take that very serious, and I do realize how much they have. And I think that's why, too, when we talked about earlier, evolving your coaching, you have to have hard conversations. You gotta gotta meet these young people where they are. How is life? How is you doing? You can't just, and they got to be able to speak freely. They got to be able to speak freely, and I think if I can't help them, I've got to know where do I need to go to help them. So yes, it's real, and I think that's where those relationship comes in. And I think, the trust thing is really, really important, in that regard. So if I can help them, I've got to get them somewhere to where they can get help. But it's a lot that they are taking on, so much more than I ever did in growing up and going through college.
Well, another reason why I agree with you is because when you guys went to Costa Rica recently, I saw a
Mhm.
video of you dancing with your players, and I didn't.
Yeah.
And I looked in your bio before we started, and it said that you had competed in 3 marathons. I'm like,
Yeah.
she's a marathon runner, and she's a dancer, and she's a basketball coach? I mean, what can't she do?
I don't know how much of a dancer I am, but I get out there and do something. I don't care, So I make them dance with me because they're way better than I am, so I don't look so bad, but yeah, it's that Costa Rica trip was great. That was a great bonding experience for us. We actually did some missions work over there. We did our missions work first. I really felt like it was important for our players to see just how blessed and how lucky they are. I think it's important they see how much their parents have sacrificed for them, how much their parents have given them, and what they get here. And I think that so we did a couple clinics for the people of Costa Rica are just phenomenal, but it's a very poor country. So we did a couple of clinics for those young kids, and then we gave away. We donated shoes, we washed feet, and gave away shoes, and it was great. Now we did all the zip lining and all the rainforests and all that stuff, but our players got a lot out of that trip and really enjoyed the missions work as well. So it was an incredible experience going over there. I would have recommended to anybody to get over there, and because the people of Costa Rica are so nice, they're just great people.
Okay, best food that you guys had to
Mhm.
eat.
Oh gosh, the food, God, food's really good too. I don't think it's good for your waistline, but it's really good food. It's good if it's good for your waistline. Oh gosh, I think I don't know, I can't think of the name, the plantains or
Yeah,
is that what
plantains.
it's called?
Mhm.
Yeah, those are really, really good. And I don't really eat those here, but over there, and the coffee, like I'm a coffee fanatic. Like I am a coffee. Matter of fact, I got coffee. I'm always a coffee. Um, and they grow their own coffee, and the coffee is phenomenal. It's really, really good. It's not the cappuccino. You can get cappuccino, but I don't like that. I like just a regular cup of coffee, and it's really, really good. So, but all the food was delicious over there, but those plantains were on point. Yeah, really good stuff.
Speaking on your all's trip to Costa Rica, when you guys go on international trips like that,
Hmm.
what are some things that you try and get out of that other than doing some outreach, being able to take
Hmm.
in some tourism and stuff like that? What are some things that you personally going into that trip try and take out of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. That trip was huge for us. It was really important because, I have 7 new players. So I'm sorry, 6 new players. When you have 6 new players, it's really nice to take a trip like that because when you have to do that, you really get to know each other.
Mhm.
And so, we had come to summer school for about 5 weeks and or 6 weeks rather, and then we went on that trip for a week. And I tell you, our team came back. It was like they'd known each other forever. So it was so neat to do that. And we played a couple of games over there, but I really, when we did the trip, I really had told him, say, I want a couple games, but I really don't care about the games because I really wanted to practice before we made the trip. So I get the practice, I'm good. But the 2 games was good for us to play. Um, so I think for us, it was an incredible experience. But I think we're about to see, so far, I would say we're much further ahead because of that trip being we start practice next week. Currently we're just in our 8 hours. We only have 8 hours. Then we get the 4 hours of basketball right now. Now, starting next Monday, we'll get to 20 hours. So, I really feel like we're much further ahead because of that trip and what we got to do. And they just bonded. I mean, our players really bonded and just spent a lot of time together.
I want to hit a little bit on recruiting before we talk about next season for you all, but
Hmm.
in regards to recruiting, I got to ask this question.
Hmm.
How often do you come back to West Virginia and really, plant a seed in regards to Stetson women's basketball here in the Mountain State? How often do you try and come back and, recruit some of the in-state players?
Yeah, I try a lot. I've especially in the last few years, I've really, I've gotten back there more because I think the talent has gotten, you have to. I think there's players that can play here and help us. So, but I go back there as much as I can. I still have family there. I have a sister in Hurricane and I have a brother still in Smithers. So, I get back there as much as I can. Plus, I go back at least in the fall. I do miss the fall, so I do go back a little bit in October, and I go back one time in the spring. But I like the players, the up and coming players. I think you've got some really good, high school players coming up in these next few classes that could play at a lot of places. So I love to sign. I haven't signed a player. I've yet to sign a player um, from West by God. I hope I can do that here in the next 2 or 3 years. That would be phenomenal. They like the thought of coming to Florida, but sometimes, I mean, even speaking for myself, they don't want to leave West Virginia. They want to stay right there. I mean, and what can I say to them? I mean, like I went 20 minutes up the road, University of Charleston. So, I mean, I'm not one, I wouldn't leave the state either. So, it's just a lot of times it's just the distance, but I'm bound to land one at some point. Somebody's going to go. I'm gonna make a break, especially with the Allegiant airline flying in and out of there all the time. I think it's way better. It's way easier to get there now. So I'm hoping that happens. But I do go up there quite frequently, but not in
Okay,
the wintertime.
not in the wintertime?
No, 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 not in the wintertime.
Come
Forget that,
on.
Taylor. I ain't gonna come up there and nope, no way. Forget that. I don't miss that.
Well, I can tell you live in Florida. I mean, that's I mean, I could have told you that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. In the wintertime, don't even think about it.
Okay, so in regards to when you all go out as a staff to recruit players, what are
Mhm.
some qualities in those student athletes that you guys try and, pick apart from other players that you guys are trying to pursue as well?
Yeah. I think it's really important. I really I look at their commitment level and how hard they play. I know we all talk about effort, but I do think, effort is it's an overused word, but it's where it's at. I mean, it's just like, you know, if you don't want a player who's going to jog around, they just jog and they don't get after it. They don't hustle after loose balls. And I think for me, I just kind of look at the little things. Obviously the playing hard is a big thing, but you know, they're not always the most talented player. But if they're, hustling after loose balls, diving after loose balls, cheering up clapping for their teammates, um, if they hustle back after they turn the ball over, that's huge to me. You don't want a player who's they turn the ball over and they pout back. I mean, or they don't get back or they jog. Like I tell our players all the time, you don't have to say you're sorry. So when you turn the ball over, it screams, I'm sorry if you sprint back. That you don't ever have to say my bad or I'm sorry. Well, I know you feel bad about that turnover. But what's going to show us and scream it louder and clear is after you turn it over, you're the first one back, not to give up a layup. So I think it's things like that they need to understand that as coaches, we're constantly looking. It's competitive. I mean, it's really like, I tell people too, like when I recruit them, we go to AAU and there'll be 300 coaches sitting around a court. And, you've got some AAU teams there that are, one in particular, I can't mention that, it's illegal, but has done a phenomenal job of getting coaches to come and done it, he's gotten kids there. And, we're all sitting around the court and there's 300 coaches and you have, not necessarily on his team, but you see some of these kids on teams and they're jogging. And I'm thinking, well, if you're going to jog in front of 300 coaches, you're definitely going to jog in my practice. So, that is the time really that I think you just see a lot. You see a whole lot. You see, can they play when they're tired? Because they're going to be tired. If you're playing a couple games a day, you're probably going to be tired. So I think it's and you're also watching the parents. I mean, if you got some crazy parent yelling up in the, you just like, okay, forget it. I mean, I'm just serious. And these parents, they think we're not watching them. We're watching. So if you got some lunatic parent going crazy up there and yelling at the ref and killing the coach, we're just all going to go, well, forget that, So, or at least I do. So I think the work ethic, the commitment level, and getting to know them, I do ask them, what'd you do today? I think it's a great question. They tell me what they did. If it's, that they played games all day, played Nintendo, or they did, shopped at the mall. I kind of go, or is there any time for any basketball in there? And then I think, their commitment level. And I want somebody who has some passion. So I think those three things, their work ethic, their commitment level, and their passion. I want somebody who's enthusiastic. They love the game. They love to play basketball, because, college basketball is not for everybody. It's not for everyone. And, this is a real commitment. This is a real commitment. And I know these kids are on scholarship and they're getting paid for, but they're earning it. If you do it the right way, you're earning every cent of it. So those are the main things we look for, and we just I do think the parents are a real key too, though. I think at some point, I like how parents help and guiding their daughter is great, but I think at some point, their daughter has to, there has to be some type of communication with the head coach. It can't always be the parent.
How big of a factor does communication come into the mix for you in regards to recruiting? Obviously, when you
Mhm.
approach somebody, you like that one-on-one connection with them. If they're
Mhm.
able to talk to you, like they're sitting down for an actual interview, and then the
Mhm.
follow-up, and then, like you just said, like you're checking in on them. How consistent are they? How big is the communication side for you?
It's big because, for us, it can't be a one way where we're always the one, you know, calling or talking or initiating, and they never either reciprocate or, like one of the things I'm big on is I think it's important we come up there and watch players play. It's important we see them in the summertime. It's important they see the head coach. I think as the head coach, and I say this all the time, that assistants are going to come and go. And I'm not saying assistants are not important, but if the head coach is not sitting on your game, or at least at some point, we can't be at every game, but if the head coach is not there, then I don't know how serious they're somewhere. I mean, I can't be out all the time. I do have an assistant coach. All three of my assistants recruit, but I have one in particular who's out all the time. I can't do that as the head coach because I'm not going to neglect the players that I have, but I can be out some and quite a bit. And, I think for me, if they're never sitting on you, you're the head, then they're really not serious because they've been somewhere, so, um, and I also feel like, but I also think it's important that that player makes an effort to go to come down here. So if I've recruited a player for 3 years and they've never come on my campus, then I'm kind of like, okay, they're not they're not really interested. I think it's important that at some point when they have the time, they can come down as well for an unofficial visit, or if they give us an official visit when it's allowed, permitted by the rules. I think that's really, really important that it's reciprocated.
And then finally, it's another food question for you. So when you come
I
back to
love
what
food. I'm Italian. I love food. Go ahead.
There we go. That's what we like. So
Yes.
when you come back to Charleston,
Uh-huh.
what's your go-to spot that whenever you go there to eat, you're gonna walk out of there stuffed?
Oh my goodness. So many good spots. Well, um, Charleston, my favorite spot would be, oh wow, Fazio's.
Ooh, that's a good
It's
choice.
down there. It's downtown Charleston. That's what it's. The Fazio's right there, right? The Italian
Mhm.
place. I know how to get there, but yeah, but that is one of my all-time favorites. It's right there downtown. I love it's been there for years. I love the Italian food there. Really, really good. Um, and there's another place that's new that I just recently started going to, and uh it's over by the market. It's oh gosh, I
Bricks
cannot
and
think of.
barrels?
Yes, that's it. Bricks and barrels. That is really good food there. And I love that market down there on that end. That used to not be there in the ballpark. That's really cool over there. But the food there is really, but Fazio's is is like the classic, just the classic, So, really, really, and that's been there forever. I mean, forever. So, and I don't know if you ever hit the Spring Hill Bakery and the hot dogs they
Have
have.
I ever hit the Spring Hill? Do you
I,
know who my dad
I'm
is?
Yeah, I know you did. Well, listen, so I got to tell you this. So every time I come there, my sister lives in Hurricane, I go to Charleston. I always get off that Dunbar exit. I go in there. Can I get about 10 hot dogs? I love those. So those kill me. Those kill me, Taylor. Like I come back and I feel like I've gained 20 pounds. I
Oh,
mean, like I'm
I'm the exact same way. So real quick as well. So whenever so
you
we used
hit that one too?
all the time, as much as I
Yeah,
can. I
yeah,
mean, as much as I can. But
yeah.
growing up, we used to live over in North Charleston before we moved down into Putnam County. And my uncle from Ohio, who also went to South Charleston, whenever he would come to our house, he'd always be like, "All right, here's the deal. We know the drill. Saturday mornings, I'll get Spring Hill Bakery. By the time you guys wake up,
Mhm.
it'll be there." And I knew every time that the door opened and closed for the first time Saturday morning, I knew who it was, and it was him.
Yeah.
And they'd be gone in a flash. I mean, I'm not kidding you. It was so good. How could you not want one?
Exactly. My mother used to work there when I was in junior high. And I always go back and look at these pictures of my mom. And so when the bakery would close and when she'd come home, they'd have the extra stuff. What they make everything fresh. So she'd bring back the goodies with her. I thought, well, no wonder I was such a fat kid in junior high. Look at me, but I never forget my mom, bless her heart. She's so good. She would come, she would work through lunch and we'd have a school time game because I mean, well, obviously, I played, went to junior high at Spring Hill Junior High with your dad, but we'd have a school time game and she'd take her lunch, she'd work through lunch, and so she could leave at 2 o'clock to come to my school time game because it would be from 2 to 3. So, our parents make those sacrifices, and it's those little things that we never ever forget that make a world difference in our lives. So, but yeah, she'd always bring home the goodies. I thought, God, no wonder I was so pudgy. So yeah, great stuff, great stuff. I'm gonna hit that in October when I come up. By the way,
Good to
I'll
know.
be
I'll be on the look for that. I'll be on the look.
there. We go.
Well, Coach, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure being able to chat with you about everything going
Taylor,
on down in
thank
Stetson,
you.
and awesome.
Well, you're doing an amazing job. I tell you what, I'm so impressed with you and you're just doing awesome. You really are. And I'm not surprised. You come from the best DNA. You've got the best dad in the world. So he's a good man. He
Well,
really is. I just cannot say enough about him. So I'm not surprised that you are on the path to greatness.
well, thank you, Coach. I really do appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, yeah. All right. And when I get up there, we'll connect, no question about it.
Absolutely. And that will conclude episode 117 of Hoops Across the Mountain State with our terrific guest, Coach Lynn Bria from Stetson University. You can follow me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7 for all the latest about this podcast, and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify as well. We're moving closer to the beginning of basketball season. Yes, I know it's football season still, but we're going to try and get out more weekly content, so you won't want to miss what's coming up next on Hoops Across the Mountain State. Thank you
Yeah.
all for listening, and stay safe.